Okay, here what we're going to do is we're going to cover a framework that you can actually use to analyze information from any situation, but we're going to be using it mostly for cases, right? So we're going to call this the 5C framework. Now, what is the idea here? The idea is how can we systematically look for all relevant information in a marketing setting, okay? And to do that, we're going to create 5 big buckets that we want to look for information about. Okay, the first one, and I will probably argue the most important one, is your customers, right? We're going to talk about some different aspects that relates to that. Second one, the company. Look internally and see what kind of capabilities and resources you have available, what kind of potential issues are coming from your side, what do you need to improve or get better at, okay? Number 3, your competitors. How many are there and who they are? And how you define your industry is going to essentially dictate who you're looking at for competition. We'll talk some more about this in a minute. Okay. Next is context. Everything else that is outside of you that will also impact the well-being, let's say, of the company. Okay. Things like the economy, any regulations or laws, any pandemics that might be going on at the time, right? Anything that else that is external is beyond your control, but it's gonna impact either for the better or the worse the way you do business. Okay. And then finally, you don't do it alone. You go with collaborators, right? This could be, for example, your suppliers that are going to enable you to maybe put together products that otherwise you will not have the resources to, and or it could be also your distributors, right? Somebody else that it's going to enable you to reach your customers more efficiently or at all, right? So let's discuss a little bit more about each of these 5 big buckets, okay? These are the 5 big buckets that we want to have information about so that we can make better decisions. Okay, so first one is your customers. Where are you going to get information about your customers? Well, if you've taken a consumer behavior class, you've been talking about this for a whole semester, right? But if you haven't, let me walk you through a few of the things that you need to think about. Okay. First is who's going to be making the decisions, right? Sometimes this is trivial and obvious, right? If you're talking about a young adult that lives on their own and they are buying gum, right? Chewing gum. Well, in that case, the decision is going to be made uniquely by the user. So the purchaser, user is all one and the same person. Okay. But oftentimes, if you're looking at families, for example, if you're looking at businesses, right, what will happen is the decision becomes a lot more complex. So you are in a business to business setting, there's going to be a lot of people involved in the decision making process. But also, if you're looking at a business to consumer setting, because oftentimes consumers live within families and families involve multiple agents, you're going to have different roles that are actually played. Okay. So, for example, in my case, I have 3 kids, right, and a wife, right. So we are a family of 5, and we have people that play these different roles, right? Initiator, it will be somebody who realizes that there is a problem. So, for example, my 10-year-old will come to me and say, "Hey, we are out of ketchup," right? So he's triggering a potential problem. He's making me aware of something that is happening, and he's initiating the process by which we're going to be going about doing something about it. In this case, the lack of a particular product, or it could be something that doesn't work, right? I'm using this glue for this and just not doing what I wanted to do, right? Or I'm trying to achieve this and I can't do it with what the products that we have uh, right now at home, okay? Then we have the influencer. The influencer is somebody that is going to sway the decision maker one way or the other because of their input. Right? So when I go to the store with my kids, oftentimes they will bring products to me, say, "Hey dad, why don't we buy this?" It's usually chocolate and candy and stuff like that, of course, because I will buy those things too if I won't gain weight, right? And if it wasn't unhealthy. But they are influencing my purchasing habits, right? So, that's a direct influencer. There are other influencers as well, right? That might be more subtle, right? Okay. And then there is the decider, right? Which in my household is my wife. She's the one that makes the calls for most things. And because happy wife, happy life, right? And then don't tell anybody I said that. So the person that is going to be making the decision. And then we have the purchaser, which might be a different person from the decider. So my wife will write on a list the things that she wants me to buy because I am the one that buys the groceries at home. Why? Because she doesn't like shopping for groceries. And I don't mind at all. In fact, that's how I know a lot about new products that come in the marketplace because I'm shopping all the time. So I actually enjoy the process. Okay. So I'm the purchaser. And then the user, when I buy some chips because I'm trying to lose some weight, I buy the chips, and my wife decided to buy that we should buy chips, and then my kids will be the ones that eat most of the chips, right? And so the user, the purchaser, the influencer, the decider, initiator might be different people within the household, and you really need to understand who is doing what so that you can target your messaging to the right agent. Okay. Because the kind of messages you're going to provide for a user or for a decider might be very different because they might care about different things. So you need to understand these roles well. And for some products, this might be very simple. For other more challenging products, you might have to be very careful about this. Okay. What else? You also need to understand how these decisions are made, right? What kind of process is followed by consumers, right? First, they're going to do information search, right? And the information search might be just recalling from memory the last time they bought that product, or it might be a lot more extensive where they go online and they look for reviews about the product. They might talk to a friend or somebody that they think is knowledgeable in that area, right? Then after we've done some information search, then what we're going to do is we're going to create a set of products that we are considering. We're going to call that the consideration set, right? And once that you are within that set, you have a good chance of being chosen. But if you're not, why are you not, right? That will be an important thing to understand. Then what the consumer is going to do with those products that are in the consideration set is try to decide in some sort of criteria that they use to choose one over another. And this could be very simple. The cheapest option from the three that are acceptable is the one I choose. Or I care about this, or I care about that. There are different criteria that are used. Sometimes the criteria that they use are unique. It's only one variable like price. Sometimes it's a convolution of different things. It could be price, quality, it could be functionality, it could be performance, it could be anything really that is a characteristic of the product or the service. Okay, so understanding how that works, it's actually complex and might require quite a bit of market research. Okay, sometimes that market research will be provided to you in the case, so then you will use it to try to understand which criteria is being used and which one of those attributes is more important for customers, so that you can use this to your advantage when you're designing the product, if you're coming up with a new product, for example. Okay, what else? Then you need to understand how is that particular product consumed, right? Where does it get bought? Is it something that people plan ahead of time, and because of that they go maybe to the place where it might be either cheapest or there is the most assortment for that product category, or is it something that is bought more on the fly, right? Because if it is bought on the fly, then being close to the customer is more important than being really cheap, right? So then maybe you want to have a vending machine, for example, right? Something that enables you to have a lot of points of sale, and that is going to enable you to get to that customer as easily and as conveniently as possible, right? How is the product used? Is it something that is used uniquely in private, or is it something that is shared with others? And if so, that has implication for how you design the product, right? How frequently is the product purchased, right? If you look, for example, at insurance products, which is kind of a rather boring product category if you ask me, although you won't be able to tell if you watch some of the commercials from Geico, for example, right? As a product category, it's not very exciting, right? For example, auto insurance, okay? So if you look at frequency of use and frequency, for example, of shopping for the product, you will see that most people buy car insurance under three conditions, right? One of the three conditions are met. One, you buy car insurance when you buy a new car. No surprises, right? When I say new car, I mean a car that you didn't own before. Whether it's new or used, it doesn't matter. Okay. Number two, when is do you buy car insurance? Second time is when they raise your rates, right? They raise your rates, and guess what happens? Boom. You get a nasty financial surprise, and now you decide, okay, fine, you do this. Now I'm going to look around and see if I can get it for cheaper. And then number three, you tend to look for car insurance when you actually use the car insurance because you have a claim and your experience is not as good as you expected. So maybe they cover some of the cost of the repairs, but they ask you to go to a repair center that is not your preferred one, otherwise they won't cover everything. So a situation like that comes up and I'm like, oh, no, I'm dissatisfied with my car insurance, I'm gonna go and shop around. So unless one of those three scenarios happen, most people are not shopping for car insurance around. So things like frequency of use, frequency of purchase, very important understanding how this is going to go. And there is a whole list of things that you can consider, not only the ones we have here. These are just as suggestions to start. Okay. What else matters? What benefits are the customers looking for, right? I already talked a little bit about this. And a big one, price sensitivity, right? If you change your price, how would the customer react? Are they just going to buy it because, you know, it's something that is so important for them that a change in price is not going to impact the purchase a lot? Or the moment that you raise your prices, are they going to be switching to either the competition and or some substitutes? Okay, so analyzing and addressing price sensitivity is very, very important. And in fact, there is a whole host of techniques that you can use for this, and some of which involve a lot of math. But for the most part, it's an important aspect, especially when you're making any pricing decisions, obviously. Okay, good. So those are a few of the things that you can look at when it comes down to the consumer bucket, right? We were talking about consumers, right? What about the company, right? What about us, okay? The first and probably the most important question that you should ask yourself is, what business are you in? And this sounds like a trivial matter, but hopefully you read the article that I require you guys read. And the definition of the industry is really going to determine uniquely what you consider your competition and what you don't, okay? So if you think that you are in the, I don't know, if you're Southwest, for example, you think that you are in the airline business, okay? And then you're going to define your competition very narrowly, right? You're going to be looking at mostly Delta and United and Alaska Airlines and on, right? But if you think about your competition more broadly, because you're thinking about what your customer is trying to achieve with your product, then maybe you'll realize that thinking about your competition as just the airlines might actually be misguided, okay? Especially in a situation like now where a lot of the flights had either been canceled or there are policies in place in a lot of businesses that are trying to restrict as much as possible business travel, right? Now you're realizing that you're not only competing with airlines, but you're also competing with Zoom and with Microsoft Teams, right? So your competition perspective, it's going to really determine who you're looking at and what kind of solutions you come up with. So it's extremely important that you think about what industry are you competing in, really. Okay. So if you define yourselves as the product, you're oftentimes going to suffer in the long term, right? Because customers don't care about your product. This is probably the most important thing for you to learn when it comes down to business definition, right? Customers don't care about your product unless they collect the product. They care about the benefits that they get out of the product, okay? So at the end of the day, we're all selling services. The product is a service delivery mechanism, right? So if you're buying a drill, an electric drill, right, what you're buying is you're buying holes, right? I mean, the drill is just one mechanical device that you can use for that. But if there is a way to hang pictures without holes, right, and it doesn't involve a drill, it involves like some glue or something, then suddenly, because the customer doesn't care about using a drill, they care about getting the picture up in the wall, that's the benefit, then suddenly you're competing with a whole host of companies that you didn't know you were competing with, okay? And so you need to realize the moment that you define your business in terms of a need, the satisfying of a need from a customer perspective, as opposed to looking at it as some sort of thing that they want to buy, you're going to realize that your competition is a lot more broad, and the kind of decisions you're going to be making in terms of designing products are going to change quite a bit, right? So ask yourself about any company, right? What business are you in, right? Are you in the business of making cars, really? Yeah. What if somebody comes up with a technology that enables you to fly, right? Will you take that technology if it was, reasonably safe and reasonably inexpensive? I know that you can buy a private jet, but they are not that cheap, right? The cheapest private jet I think you can buy new is a couple of $1,000,000, right? So most of us don't have that kind of chunk change, right? But what if somebody could make that come down to maybe $100,000, right? And then will you buy it, right? So $100,000 is a lot of money for a car, but it's not crazy, right? There are a lot of $100,000 Cadillac Escalades that are sold every day. If I remember correctly, about 25,000 of them every year in the U.S., right? So, and when I say Escalades, there are many others that cost a lot more than that and that are sold in the U.S. as well, right? It's just a car that maybe people don't associate with $100,000. If you could come up with a transportation device that enables you to do that and travel, let's say 300 miles per hour instead of 60, wouldn't you take that? So you need to think more broadly. In fact, when I was talking to somebody in charge of product development for one of the large consumer packaged goods companies, it was Johnson and Johnson. I was asking him, we were talking about furniture polish, and he was telling me, I am not worried about what my immediate competitors are doing, because I know what they have in their labs, or I have a sense for what they are working on, right? What I'm worried about is those guys in nanotechnology that are coming up with coatings that are going to make the furniture be dust repellent, and then you don't need to use dust polish anymore. That's what I'm working about, because at the end of the day, people don't want to use dusting polish, right? What they do is they use it because they have a problem. If you can get rid of that problem in some other way, they will be happy. They will take that in a heartbeat, because you get the benefit, plus you don't need to, polish the furniture anymore. That would be nice, right? Yeah. So it's about satisfying consumer needs. It's not about the product. Don't define your industry as the product. Define your industry about what consumer need you are satisfying. Okay. Here you have another example. You can read through it, and I think I've given you enough at this point. Okay. Good. So what else do you need to know about your competitors other than who they are, and who they are going to come together with the market definition? If you define it broadly, the number of competitors you need to worry about is a lot bigger. Okay, what do you want to know about them? Well, you want to know all sorts of things, right? You want to know what kind of capabilities do they have, right? What kind of resources they have access to, and what is the cost structure. A lot of these things are hard to find out, but if you are trying, you can learn a lot. First, most public companies need to disclose quite a bit of information, both financial and about how the business is operating, because of the legalities involved of being a corporation, okay, both in the US and in other places, right? So they need to file quarterly statements about their activities. You can learn a lot from there, okay? Plus, people like to talk a lot. So if you go to industry conferences, you'll see how a lot of the R&D people just talk about what they are working on openly, right? There are some details that are, kept safe. There is definitely industry secrets, right? But there is a lot of things you can learn. Also, you can look at patent data, right? When a company files a patent, they need to disclose a lot of information about what they are doing, okay? And you can learn a lot from that. So there are many ways in which you can learn. You can also use less ethical means, and I will strongly discourage you from doing that. There has been multiple executives, both in the US and all over the world, that have been both fined and jailed for spying illegally, like using wiretaps on their competitors. This is not only unethical, but also illegal, right? So just stick to all these other things that you can actually do that are legal and in the app and app. Also, try to understand what your competitors are trying to work on and thinking, okay? And you can get a lot of this information from the same sources that I was describing before, right? What kind of mindset do they have? What kind of projects are they working on? And where they are basically focused their attention, so that you can see what their next moves are going to be, Good. That's about competitors. What about context? Context is everything else that is external to the firm that will have an impact in how you operate, right? Things like political changes, right? When you change from one party to another, like it just happened recently, what implications is that going to have for tax policies, for the laws and regulations in different industries, etc., etc. Economic forces, what's happening with the economic cycle? Is it going up or down, right? Is unemployment in the rise, or is it coming down? And if it is, that has a huge impact on consumption, and because of that, maybe your sales, right? Social changes, technology is changing all the time, right? How we communicate. I don't have to tell you, being a digital native, and how different communication is for you if you compare to your parents, or let alone your grandparents, right? So you can look at all these factors. There is really a myriad of things. Of course, last year, COVID, right? That has changed pretty much every industry in the world, right? And some for better, some for worse. If you ask Amazon, it has been a huge push to their sales, because a lot of people have moved to buying a lot of their, even groceries, to an online model, right? So all sort of marketing effects from something that is just a shock that is totally external, that you cannot control. So market turbulence, right? Or sometimes you have technological discontinuities, right? That's when somebody comes up with something technologically that is a lot better than what's been in the past. So whenever a car manufacturer launches solid state batteries, lithium-ion batteries, and there's going to be a huge leap in the range of the cars, and hopefully a drop in the price of the cars as well. Okay, so when that discontinuity happens, because we already have those solid-state batteries in the lot, when they can actually be manufactured efficiently and cheaply enough, and there will be dramatic changes probably in that particular industry. Okay, so you need to be up with what's happening around your industry in all these aspects. Okay, here you have some more demography, right? We're getting older, the pyramid has inverted. Now we have more older people than we have younger people, especially in developed countries like the US, where the natality rate is very low, right? And you have migration. You know, a lot of people are, for example, moving away right now from California. Right? There's a big push to move to states like Texas. Okay, why? Because the economy in California is not doing very well. They have some serious problem with homeless people, right? And on and on and on. A lot of the regulations and legislations that they are passing are not exactly pro-business. So a lot of businesses that are headquartered in California, like Tesla, for example, are moving away from California, right? This is something that you should actually be well aware of. Okay, and this list keeps going, so I'm not going to go through all this stuff. Okay, but all these aspects you should think about. In some cases, these aspects are very important. In other cases, these are just secondary. Good. And then the last bucket is collaborators. What are your collaborators? Well, upstream from you are your suppliers, right? These are companies that collaborate with you, providing you both products and services that enable you to function. Okay, this could play a huge role in, for example, product development when they have know-how that maybe you don't have. I've already talked about a few examples of this, right? You also have some suppliers downstream, right? Those will be, for example, your distributors, right? That maybe give you access to markets that otherwise you cannot reach, right? If you're trying to enter other countries like China, for example, right? Having a local distributor will go a long way for you to be able to sell your products locally, okay? Not only because until a few years ago, for legal reasons, you need to have a local partner, but also because you might not understand the market properly for you to operate there, right? So all that know-how that the local distributor has, it's invaluable when it comes down to launching products, okay? Yeah, for example, I can give you an example of what happened to Walmart when they entered the Mexican market, right? So Walmart is a huge company. I'm sure everybody knows Walmart, right? And when they entered the Mexican market, the first year, they had a sale after Christmas sale. But what they didn't realize, because it was operated by managers in the US is that the tradition for gift giving in Mexico is different from Spain. The gifts, in Spain and the US. In the US, the gifts are traditionally given between the night of the 24th and the 25th, so for Christmas, right? But in Mexico, traditionally the gifts are actually given on the 6th of January, which is the Epiphany, right? When the three Magi, or the Magi, maybe I should say, came with their gifts, right? And so, because the tradition is different, what happened to Walmart is that, they thought that their sales for toys were pretty much done on the 26th, and after the 26th, they reduced the price of a lot of their products, and people in Mexico got, of course, a great deal because a lot of them have not done their Christmas shopping yet, and they got to shop massively at a discount. Obviously, that policy makes no sense, and if you have local know-how, you will not actually engage in policies that are obviously totally contrary to the traditions or customs of the place, right? You also might have industry alliances where you get together with other companies. Who does this? There are many examples of it. What can I think of top of my head? I like cars a lot, so I can tell you a couple of those. For example, Toyota and BMW have teamed up to launch the Toyota Supra. Supra, the old model, the one that is featured in a bunch of movies. Need for Speed, right? The Toyota Supra, the old model was totally an in-house product from Toyota. The engines, transmissions, the whole car was built in Japan by Toyota, and obviously with whatever suppliers they had, but it was all internally. And what happens is it's a sports car, two-door sports car, and the market for sports cars is very small nowadays. Right? There is an overwhelming trend towards SUVs and large cars. So because of that, Toyota didn't think that it would be profitable for them to develop a car in-house for sports car, which is what the Supra is. And because they haven't sold the Supra for at least 20 years in the US until last year, right? And what they did is they teamed up with BMW, who's been selling sports cars non-stop over those 20 years. And essentially, if you look at a Toyota Supra, it's mostly a BMW product, right? The exterior is different, the interior trim is different, but if you look at the mechanicals, you can see that all of the parts are shared. In fact, upwards of 90% of the car is shared. So, you have alliances that are actually forged where, you have two firms that are competing in many aspects, but they compete in some. Okay. Good. So look at all these factors, and with all this information, you will move to make your decisions within the case.